Hi, it's Jared from Strong Roots Farm. Welcome back to the farm. Today, we are going to answer one of the questions that I get more than ever. This is probably the most requested video I've ever had. And of course, we're talking about raising cattle on small acreage. I get the question all the time, how many acres do I need to raise cattle? Or can I raise cattle on 6 acres? And it's really hard to answer because I don't know what your land looks like. I don't know where you live, all those kind of things. And so I talk to people from all over and in many different countries. But today, I'm going to take you through it. I'm going to talk about what you have to do, the struggles you are going to face when you try to raise cattle on small acreage. This would be less than 10 acres in the Midwest United States. So we can get about 1,000 pounds of animal per acre because of our grass and our annual rainfall here. So you're going to need to change that up to where you live. If you live in Oklahoma or Texas, it may be very different. So in this video, I hope to help you answer all of those questions to help you get it done if that's what you're looking to do. It may seem kind of negative as we go through it because there is lots of negative problems when you go to small herds on small acreage, but stick around to the end, follow us through it, and I will help you answer those questions. And by the end, you will know if this is something you should do. And I will give you the advice as if you were here today asking me what you can do on your 5 to 10 acres. Stick around. As we get started, I'm going to talk about each of these points, and I may say you shouldn't do it. And with that, I'm coming from the place of it's not a great idea financially and stewardship wise of your land or stewardship wise of your money. I'm not saying it can't be done, and I'm not saying no, you can't do it. I'm just saying if you're asking for my advice, I'm going to say this is not a good idea for you because I care about you being successful. So if you're doing it and I'm saying it shouldn't be done this way, I'm not saying you're an ignoramus who leaves 4 golf tees left over. Cracker Barrel joke. The main point of every decision when it comes to raising cattle on a small acreage, anything really on a small farm, where you have minimal space, minimal infrastructure as you get there, and you're having to stick money into it, it's all going to come back to the investment versus the reward. So as we look at financial investments, there is a big difference, and this is my first point, between value and cost. So for instance, the ability to look out and see cattle grazing out your back window is a value for some people. They enjoy that. They want to see that scenery. But that is not profitable. There is zero profit coming into your pocket just because you can look out and see that. So cost is and profit is zero, but there is a value to that. Now I mention that because people that I talk to ask me about all these things. They want these things. They think there's a value in them. And the same thing comes when I talk to people who are quitting. What I have found as you decrease in money, you lose money on cattle because you're doing it the wrong way or you don't have enough or things are so costly, the value of those non-monetary items decrease over time as your personal finances also decrease. So your enjoyment looking at cattle out the back window throughout the years goes down as you determine you're losing money. And when all of those values decrease and you only look at the money, some people give up. My goal for you is that you will not quit. So as we get into that, that's why I bring this up and I want you to think about that. All right, the very first struggle, so you got the kind of the main point there, but the very first struggle you're going to have is with infrastructure costs. So I want to put this into perspective for you. If you have 100 acres, it is cheaper to fence 100 acres per acre than it is to fence in 10 acres or 5 acres. So how can that be? So let's just say you have the skill set and the tools to build fence. For me to build this fence, lots of years of experience. I have a video series on it. You can get through it. I have all the tools. I have a post driver. I can go and buy bulk material. The cheapest fence that you can build is going to cost you around $4 per foot to build it yourself. You can do high tensile fence if you're only running cattle and get down in the mid $3 per foot, spacing your posts out a little further. If your ground is pretty flat, it can go a little cheaper. The hillier you get, you have to put more posts in. So there's some factors there, but $4 a foot is a pretty good estimate. On 100 acres, 100 acres is a square of land that is 2,090 feet by 2,090 feet on all four sides. So if we look at that, you have 8,360 feet to fence the outer perimeter of that 100 acres. At $4 a foot, that's just over $33,000 to fence in that 100 acres of pasture. But if you take the $33,000 and you divide it by 100, you end up with $334 roughly per acre to fence that 100-acre pasture. Now let's compare that to a 10-acre pasture. So 10 acres is going to roughly be 665 feet square, okay? 665 feet on each side of a perfect square if you got lucky and bought a perfectly square farm. So 2,660 feet of fence is needed to fence in the 10 acres. That's going to cost you at $4 a foot, $10,640. Divide that by 10 acres, you are now at $1,064 per acre to fence in the 10 acres versus the $334 an acre for the guy who had 100 acres. If you have even a smaller piece of land, let's say 5 acres, that cost per acre goes up to $1,504 on 5 acres, just fencing the perimeter. Well, why is this a big deal? You have to have fence, you have to keep your cattle in, okay? And when you go to fence in, the inner perimeter, the inner area becomes cheaper the more ground you have. So if you're only buying 5 acres, it's going to cost you significantly more to gain acreage that is inside the fence. This is important because your cattle need to pay for that fence. So I have to debunk this right off the beginning because this is what I get answered when I bring this stuff up. This is what people rebut to me more often. We're not looking to make a profit with our cattle. We're not looking to have our cattle pay for our land or pay for our farm. We're just looking to raise our own beef, and we have some money and we want to invest into it. And that is fine. It's fine to have that mentality. Not everybody has to be a profitable cattle farmer. And honestly, if I had 100 head, I'm not getting rich quick. Nobody in this game is. It is not a highly profitable investment. We all know this. It can be profitable, but the problem comes is as you put in more finances year after year, the struggles will increase with stress. And so let's help you understand what that means as we still talk about the same analogy or situation with fence. So we'll stick that you have the 10-acre plot. When I build fence, I tend to amortize it. So I take a portion of the cost and I deduct that from my profits for a certain amount of years. And there are certain products that you can deduct for longer and certain for shorter tax-wise, but just in my mind, a financial easement, I typically take fence as 10 years. If I build a piece of fence, I can deduct 10% per year for 10 years. So on that 10 acres, since it cost you $1,064 to fence it, you now have to deduct $106 per year. Like, well, that doesn't sound bad at all. And I get that reply all the time. And I'm like, the problem is it's magnified with everything that you purchase. Then it's another $5 on the water. Then you got a cattle trailer and the manure spreader and the tractor and so on and so on. Everything that you buy, if you're amortizing it out, has to be deducted off of the profit of each animal. When you spend enough and you have so few cattle, eventually you're losing money. When you lose money in this game, because it's work, it is labor, even if it's enjoyable, even if you only have a few, there is still labor. Eventually the stress grows when you eventually will say, or other people that I have seen will say, it's just not worth it. I work all the time. I don't pay myself any labor, and my beef is more expensive than I can buy it from the guy down the street because it's so costly to get started. Can it be done? Yes, I'm going to help you with that. But understand the financial problem with being small is that everything is more expensive for you. Now, I do want to talk about the financial part on one last thing, and that's on buying the actual animals. And so you have to have the infrastructure in. Infrastructure costing is my very first point. You have to have all that in before you get cattle. I hope that you understand that. You cannot have cattle on temporary fence. You can't have them without shade. You can't have them without water. You can't have them without a structure. You need something to protect your animals on your small acreage. So when you go to buy your first calf, I'm assuming you have this infrastructure in. But then you get there to buy the calf. There is a pro with being small here. You actually have a pro because you're small. Let's say you're only going to buy 2 or 3 a year. The pro is finding 2 or 3 good ones locally to you that are acclimated to your grass is very easy. That is the pro to being small. The problem is that the guy who can afford to buy 100 at a time, he gets a better price per pound. Now I will tell you, because there's a general market, it's not a lot. I have found that guys who try to buy 1, 2, or 3 at a time versus buying a trailer load at a time or even a semi load at a time, it ends up being at most $50 to $100 a head. So let's just say you pay $50 a head more for that calf right there than I do because I buy more at a time. It's not a game changer for you price-wise on the calf. All right, I've beat up the financial train enough, but that is the one thing we talked about, right? Value versus investment and cost and money out of your pocket for your animals. And that is the number one thing. I bring all this up because that's when people quit. They say it's because it wasn't a good value for us anymore. We didn't value the work for the amount of money it was costing us to do all this work. So the next point we're going to talk about is pasture and grasses. And then at the end of this, I'm going to talk about another way. If you're not going to do 100% grass fed, some other things that you can do on small acres. Okay, so point number 2, I guess it is, as we're talking about grazing, rotational grazing, assuming you're going to try to graze, like I teach in my videos, 100% grass fed. The problem or the struggle, actually, let's do the pro first. The pro for you on small acreage is you don't need as much temporary fencing. Where I have hundreds of stakes and probably 6 or 8 of the $150 big reels of wire, you can get by with 20 stakes and a couple of the mini $25 reels, and you can rotationally graze your cattle. It's super cheap for you. That's a pro for you being small. But understand cost per head. If you divide it for the head, my cost per head of my temporary fencing is cheaper. Now, as we get into the pasture problem though, when I make a paddock, like I just put them into this field over here, we let them through this gate without making you dizzy, right through there, they're grazing over here. That's about a 2-acre paddock. Now they're gonna be there for 3 to 4 days. So I'm giving 2 acres for 3 to 4 days. And these are our fat steers. So they're just butcher steers. There's no cow calves in this herd. But when you're looking at, you have 5, 10 acres to rotationally graze, you are very inefficient with your grass. So what does that mean? Grass is cyclical. So in the spring, we have a big, what we call the flush, and grass grows very, very fast, very quickly, right? Very tall. And then it kind of slows down over the summer as you graze it. And then you have another one of those humps in the summer or in the fall. Grass will continually grow, but there's these 2 big booms. The spring boom is twice as much as the fall boom or flush. On a small acreage, the problem that you're going to have is as you try to rotate around, your paddocks are going to have to be so small in order to have 60 days between. So as you put them on this square right here, they eat it. You don't want them to eat that again for at least 30, but 60 days is better to give that ground time to rest. And that will help your ground improve, 1, but 2, it's going to help them gain weight better as you're looking to put pounds on them with grass, which is not the easiest thing to do. You have to have some grass knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge that comes into this. And that's the number one comment I get on consultations is there's a lot more to learn about grass than I realized. People tell me that all the time. So as with me on my farm, and I consider myself a small farmer. There's only 35 acres here of pasture that we can graze. And so I really kind of consider myself small, but when you talk about 5 to 10 acres, you can't keep up with the grass in the spring, so you're inefficiently eating it. You're trying to move too fast. You come back to the start too quick, or your paddocks end up being so small, it's like trying to put cattle into a shoebox. Eventually, they're gonna fight that temporary fence because it's so tight in order to have 60 little squares on a 5-acre patch that it becomes a hassle. And so that is one struggle. Now, I'm gonna give you the reason right now how to combat that. Don't do daily moves. If you're on a small acreage, don't do daily moves. Do weekly moves. Is it better to do daily moves? Is it more efficient? Yes. But in your circumstance on small acreage, the paddock just needs to be a little bit bigger to give them room to roam. The other problem you're going to have on small acreage, because you're trying to move paddocks, is moving water and shade. So it's really hard in every one of those little teeny squares to have shade unless you build like a $5,000 shade structure like we have here. Now, I didn't spend that on that. I've got about $1,500, $1,800 in that, but I welded it all, designed it all, and built it all myself. So you need something mobile to move around, which then takes another square. So there's a good 20 by 20 underneath that they mat down and don't eat well. So now the little bit of land that you have is being crushed by their feet and it's not being eaten. So your land is even more inefficient. Now keep sticking around. I told you it was going to be negative. I will get to how to combat this. And the first thing you can do to combat this is not be 100% grass fed on small acreage. Can it be done? Yes. Can you move paddocks and do it well? Yes. If your land is set up to where you have a big tree line down both sides, you probably don't need to move shade. There are circumstances and situations that not all of these things will apply to. One thing that you can do, instead of moving them like that, you could divide it into 6 or 8 squares and move them along and try to rotationally graze to better help your grass. But the one thing that is a cover of sins, if you will, the sins of poor pasture management can be covered with feeding grain. Now, we don't feed grain to our cattle here unless it's a special circumstance. We are a grass-fed beef farm, and we don't recommend that to people. But in this instance where I'm trying to help you do it on small acreage, grain can be a benefit for you if you don't mind the negativities. And so the negative things are there's chemicals in grain. It washes the omega-3s out of the beef. It adds stress to the animals. Grain is cheap right now, the summer of 2025, but grain can be expensive. And there's problems with hauling grain and where do you get your grain from, but you can get grain. And if you're buying, trying to raise your own beef versus buying it from the local grocery store and buying the grocery store's brand, all of that beef is grain fed. I guarantee you, unless it specifically says grass fed, 100% grass fed, and it's twice the price, it's grain fed beef. That is what you're getting. So at least you're doing something better. You're trying to raise your own beef and you're not giving them a lot of the medicines and hormones and other things that the big farms are giving them or the feedlots are giving them. So it's give and take on the pro and con of it. But grain will help you on a small acreage because you're bringing in calories. So the inefficiencies that you're having in your grass or lack of knowledge with pastures or whatever it would be can be covered up or assisted with the grain. Now I'll talk about this here in a minute, but I'm going to recommend that you don't buy big bag box store grain. You don't buy bag feed. You got to find grain from a mill that is local and it's actual, corn, soy, oats, molasses, distilled grain, spent distillery stuff. Though whatever they're mixing, that is a better feed. And because people are going to say, well, what kind and what? Here's the price point. If you can't buy a 50-pound bag of cattle feed that is 12% or higher, should be kind of 12 to 14% protein. If you can't buy that for less than $11, I pay, if I have to buy grain, like $9.50 a bag for a 50-pound bag at a local feed mill. So somewhere between $9.50 and $11 for a 50-pound bag, you can justify the cost of feeding grain. If it's more expensive than that, it will cost you more than the meat that they will put on their body, and you should just buy your beef from another local farmer. All right, and with that, we kind of get to our third point, I guess, here is, and it comes into some of what is my advice on the small acreage. Well, we wanted to raise cattle. Sounds like there's a lot of negativity. It's going to cost us more than it may be worth. So what are some other options? Well, some other options here as we go through our other animals. So if you want to be profitable and raise a protein on small acreage, sheep, goats, chicken are much better than cattle to do that with. One, you don't have that initial cost of fencing if you're doing chicken, because you can build chicken tractors and you don't need necessarily a perimeter fence to keep those animals in. Most people you'll see on these homesteading channels start out with that, and that is why. It is a very low capital investment in the beginning. You can build an entire butcher shop for $2,000 to $2,500 using, used kitchen material and kitchen auctions, whatever it would be. I have a buddy, I did a video on this. He built his entire thing with a yard barn. He has an entire processing center doing 1,000 birds a year. You can do that on small acreage and do it on grass and raise a wonderful protein. And you're saying, well, Jared, I want to raise cattle. We eat more beef than anything. We want beef. Raise the chicken, sell the chicken to the people who raise the beef, and use that money to buy your beef. Financially, that is a better situation for you and your family. Responsibility-wise, is it what you want to do? You're going to have to make that decision. Is the value still there? But financially, that's probably a better decision. Sheep and goats, same kind of thing. So we don't have sheep and goats here on our farm because we sell food, right? We sell beef to our customers that come here. We have pork, we have some layer eggs. We do raise chicken from time to time, but I can't justify it. There's a place in town that sells it and it's expensive. They're selling chicken breasts for $12 a pound. I would rather just sell something that you don't have to be rich to afford. And so because they already do it, if you want your chicken, they do a great job, go up there and get it. We choose to stick with the beef and the pork that I can sell for a good price to feed your family, but we don't have sheep or goats. So I don't know everything about sheep or goats. I've been around them a lot, but here is what I'll tell you about raising sheep and goats. First off, lamb as a product, whether you're selling the meat or you're selling the kids, which is their babies, not your actual children. You're selling baby lambs or you're selling the lamb meat. Lamb is more profitable per acreage on small acreage than cattle. So why don't we raise lamb? Well, it's just not what we do here. We have more acreage. But if you only had 10 acres, it's financially more responsible for you to raise lamb. It will be easier. They're easier animals to handle. There is a little bit more labor because there's some wool trimming, if you get a certain type of sheep, there is some feet trimming, there is some doctoring that's a little bit different than my knowledge that we have with cattle. And so there is, education to learn, just like there is with cattle, but it's more profitable per acre. Same with goats. There are people, I had a couple requests for goat over the time. I know who to send them to. I send them to those guys. But goats are the same way. You can sell the kids, you can sell the meat. They are profitable. There's a bigger line of goats, so you have a lot of these goats are kind of pets. And so you have a different avenue of income there. You have meat goats, you have dairy goats, and you have pets, essentially. People are buying goats to show and for pets and all kinds of other things. The problem with goats is that your fencing costs, and the same, I guess, for sheep, your fencing cost is going to be about the same as cattle. But with a goat, you need to build fence that is better than the local prison. Goats are escape artists. They like to play. They like to have things to climb on. So you're going to need to educate yourself on goats if you decide to go down that route. All that being said, this is all assuming you're buying blank land and you're a beginner starting a homestead. So not only did I give you some other options with other animals, there are other situations that would change this advice. So the first situation is grandpa leaves you the farm, right? You get a farm in a will, and it's not very big. You know, maybe they sold off some land and they gave you the 10 to 12 acres, whatever it would be, but the fence is already in, there's already a barn, there used to be cattle on it, there's water on it, he even left you his new tractor, and you have some equipment to get started, a couple feeders, whatever it would be. Well, that's a different situation because it's a different capital investment up front. You're still going to have the same struggles with grass and rotation. You're still going to have the same struggles with buying calves, but you're not going to have the same debt pressure that the others have starting out. So that situation may change the advice, but I will tell you, even in that situation, it is more profitable to raise lamb or goat over cattle. Another situation that would change this, and this is probably more likely for the average person out there, there are a lot of farmers, and if you've been watching this stuff, you'll hear about the average age of a farmer increasing all the time. When old people can't get out and retire, young people can't get in. Something Joel Salatin always says. And so when you buy a piece of land, I'm willing to bet if it's rural enough, there is somebody close to you that is local that is either getting up there in age or has health issues, or perhaps his kids just left and he needs a little help. So finding somebody that is in that situation, they need help. You can change your trade, your energy, your physical ability, your willingness to work and learn. You could trade that for help on your small acreage. Now, you're still going to have some capital investment if you buy blank land or if you buy a farm with fence or whatever it would be. But if you could borrow tractors, if you can buy hay and calves from him, if you can go and help him and gain knowledge, he has extra stuff laying around that he lets you borrow. That's a better situation, and it happens all the time. I have seen that situation work a lot. But understand, I've also heard frustrations in those kind of situations. So you have to go into it with the right mindset, and whether it's a contract or, you know, working together, you got to be humble and work together in those situations, because you can't do it without them, is kind of what you're saying in his eyes. So that can work out for you though. I've seen that work, and that would totally change the advice of this video. Let's get into a few things that I'm going to call my no-nos, things that you will totally flop if you do these things. So the first no-no is hay. So I want to talk to you about square bale hay. Picture of it right here. Feeding cattle with square bale hay is a big no-no. You have to feed round bale hay, and you will have to buy in hay on a small acreage, which means you're either going to have to haul it or you're going to have to pay for hauling. If you pay for hauling, you're going to need a tractor of some sort or a skid steer or something that can unload the hay when it is delivered. If you're not aware of the difference here, the round bales have about 25 to 35 square bales within them of weight of forage, depending on the size of the bale. A round bale in my area costs anywhere between $35 and $55, depending on the year and the weather. When hay is light and low, it ends up costing a little more. When we have a good weather and good rain, people will have a bunch of it and they can sell it for a little cheaper. Problem is that square bale hay, typically around here only purchased by horse people, goes anywhere between $8 and $12 a square bale. If you do the math, you're going to go broke quick feeding square bale hay to cattle. Next big no-no is, we've kind of already mentioned the big box store bag feeds. And we talked about the cost of this, and that's the reason. Can it be okay? Yes, but usually high production feeds, pelletized feeds that are mass produced like that, come with additives, whether it's something to hold it together glue-wise, or hormones or chemicals in it, byproducts. So there's that negativity about them. The other thing is they're typically more costly. There's much more transportation and retail costs with a TSC, a Rural King, a big box store that sells a high-end, whether it be show feed or expensive bag feed. If you're feeding that feed, it's going to cost you more than it's really worth as far as putting pounds of beef on an animal. That's a big no-no. The next thing that's going to cost you dearly and is a big no-no is buying fancy equipment. So fancy trucks, fancy cattle trailers, big expensive tractors, because you think you need them. Going into debt will sink you very quickly in this game, especially on small acreage. We've already talked about how much it's going to cost as you amortize out equipment. There are some things that you need. You need a way, like a squeeze chute, to hold an animal and take care of an animal. If they do need medical care, you need a way to load them safely and stress-free. Stress is one of the #1 problems when it comes to meat being tough. And so there are some things that you're going to have. But buying big, expensive equipment when you have the money in the beginning, whether it was from the sale of your other house or whatever it would be, when you have money and you spend it all on this big, fancy equipment, it's never going to pay itself back. That's a big no-no. The next no-no is cows. Cows meaning mama cows that have babies and a bull. You do not buy cows and a bull on small acreage. These little calves here, you're going to go to what we call the stocker industry. You're going to buy calves between 400 and 500 pounds, and you're going to keep them for a year to a year and a half and fatten them out and then butcher them. That is the only way that you can be profitable. Cows take a significant amount of money to carry them because of the land value that they need. So on a more acreage, so let's talk about that, because I know this will be a question. How many acres do I need to go from just being stockers, just buying in my calves, to being a cow-calf operation? And I would say it's where I'm at, 30 acres. Anything less than this, I wouldn't buy cows. I would only buy calves and fatten them out, whether you take them to the market and use it as a typical traditional stocker concept and model, like I just made a video of, or you're taking them all the way to butcher. But you don't buy mama cows. I know the babies are cute and it sounds cool. It's a big no-no. Another type of cattle that you want to stay away from is show cattle. So if you're in the show cattle game, you know, unless you win big, you're losing money. And most of the guys, most of my friends who do show cattle, they know they're doing it as a sport. Time to spend together with family, it's a value to them, but they know they're not making money. They know it's stressful. It takes a lot of equipment. It takes a lot of junk, really, just stuff to spray on them and push their hair out. And there's lots in the show cattle ring. And I promise you, if you want to go get offended and get in arguments with people, the show ring is where to do it. There are some prideful people when it comes to showing. Now, a lot of great people, and it's better than basketball and a lot of other things. We can argue that point. But you will lose money quickly getting into show cattle. If you're doing show cattle on small acreage, you're not doing it to produce food for your family. You're doing it for the sport of showing cattle. That's a totally different situation, a totally different video than we're talking about today. Stay away from show cattle if you're looking to produce your own beef. The next big no-no is thinking and listening to other people when they tell you you don't need permanent fence. You can do it with temporary fencing only, meaning single strand, electric wire, poly wire, even hard high tensile wire, one strand. You can do this. No, you can't. That is a big no-no. Those calves on small acreage will look for another local herd. They will not stay in. You will lose your entire investment. They will go run away. You will have to hire people to try to, if you can even find them, to bring them in. Running a single strand of wire is not a responsible decision when it comes to keeping in cattle. Can you use it, like we're talking about this stuff right here, can you use it to divide up pastures? Absolutely, and you should, but it is not a perimeter fence solution. And the last big no-no is never go to the sale barn alone. Now, what do I mean? If you're new, they can smell you. They know when you walk in to a stockyard, it's your first time. They know that you don't know anything about what you're doing, and you will make mistakes, okay? They will bid you up. I have seen this, and not every stockyard or sale barn is the same, so I'm not gonna lump them all in together. But going to the sale barn alone is a bad decision as a beginner, as somebody buying their first calves, okay? You will buy the wrong thing, or you will pay the wrong price, or you will get bid up just because people think it's funny for you to pay too much and put it all on top of it. Those cattle auctioneers are mesmerizing. It's amazing to listen to. I enjoy it. Sometimes I put on the radio and just listen to auctions, but it will cost you money. It's a big no-no. Don't go your first time alone. All right, well, that's it. So I'm going to give you some of my advice now. And can it be done? You know that it can. I've told you it can. I've told you the factors, and it's been kind of negative. And here's the thing. If you haven't clicked off this video yet and you're not discouraged yet and you still want cattle on your 5 to 6 acres or whatever it is you have, you can probably do it with that mindset. But I will tell you, I have seen it happen time and time again, that the financial burden, the stressors, all of those things can and probably will weigh you down. I get frustrated at times. I've been doing this for years and I have more land and I have a good job and my cattle are humanely raised. They're great, but sometimes they get verbally abused. I'm kind of kidding. It happens, but it's pretty rare here. We've done this long enough. We move them enough. You can tell they're pretty calm out here as we move them, but it will weigh on you. It will be frustrating. So what is some of my advice for you? You have small acreage. We've talked about it a little. Try other animals would be my recommendation. And I would try to convince you of that. I would tell you the pros and cons of other animals to help make you successful so that you don't drop out of this and quit. The problem I've seen is when people invest too much money, they get too far in debt, and then when they get frustrated, the way out is completely out. They have to sell everything and go back to a subdivision, and they just completely give up. The work is not easy, and the frustrations will wear on you over time. That is the truth. But it does come with a lot of joy. There is a lot of satisfaction. I'm obviously doing it. I want to bring people into this lifestyle. That's why I make these videos. It can be very enjoyable, but it does not lack its frustrations and struggles. If you're stuck on cattle and you wouldn't take that advice from me, then I would say my next piece of advice would be look to change the situation, change the game. So that means finding somebody local to help you, finding somebody local that will pay you to work on their cattle farm and you get your enjoyment that way. Finding somebody that is willing to help you and start slow like that. That is the way to kind of get involved with it slowly so that you don't get in financial debt. Well, there you have it. That's it. That's raising cattle on small acreage. That is the truth. These are the struggles you are going to run into. We didn't talk a lot about water. Water is going to be the same thing as fencing as far as financial burdens, putting it in, the time, all of those things. The other thing that I want to talk about financially, or I'll mention, is when you build this on your land, when you put water lines underneath ground for cattle, when you put fence on a property for cattle, and then you give up and want out, the amount of money that you invested in that does not typically raise your property value of the cost of the fence and the water. The only chance you have is if somebody is willing to pay for that because they want to do the same thing that you gave up on. And I see that all the time. Well, we invested $100,000 in this barn and all this fence and stuff, so this property has to be worth this. And it is not. It does not raise the property value that much. It does raise the value some, but it is not a value to everybody. And so that's where people get frustrated when they get out and they actually lost money on the venture and some of their savings and stuff. So I'll just put that out there as a point. So if you make smart decisions while you're in and you have to get out, make sure you can get out without going in debt or get out without carrying debt to another piece of property. That will put you in a struggle for many, many years. Hope this video helped. I'm sorry I was negative. It's part of being in the game so that I can ensure I'm giving you good advice, because I do not want anybody to look back and say we took his advice because he was looking for clicks on YouTube and it was totally wrong and it destroyed our family. My goal is that your family gets into this, they enjoy it, they stick it out, and you are successful. If you can combat all of the struggles that I mentioned today, you will be successful. Perhaps I have told people multiple times it's better to wait another 3 or 4 years till they have more of a stockpile of money to buy more land than trying to make it on their small acreage. And if you already have that land and you don't want to move, consider doing something else that is not going to put your family in such a hardship financially if it doesn't do well. And the percentages of success are just much higher with chicken and those other things because of those total costs. Thanks for watching. I'll continue to make videos. Please like and subscribe. Come along with us. If there's anything I didn't cover or that you disagree with, comment about it. I try to respond to every comment on YouTube. Sometimes it's just an acknowledgement with a thumbs up. Sometimes it's a reply back, but I try to look at and respond some way to every comment. So I do thank you so much for those. I do care about those comments. If you have a longer form question, my email is down in the description. Feel free to email me and I will try to get to those. I get those out usually within a week. I will email you back and get those things answered for you if I can. I appreciate you. I appreciate your opportunity to try to help you with this, and I hope this video was helpful for you. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Please like the video and subscribe!